Last evening, I promised that one of the things I was going to do was to look into the issue of UN General Assembly and what is happening there. So most of the discussions which are taking place or which took place yesterday at the UN General Assembly in New York were around the war in Gaza, as well as the escalation of war in Lebanon. There have been Becher attacks, walkie-talkies attacks in Lebanon, targeting Hezbollah. Hezbollah is classified as a terrorist organization based in Lebanon. So over 500 people have died due to attacks conducted by Israel in Lebanon, targeting members of Hezbollah. So this was the main discussion at UNGA in New York. Countries such as Jordan, Turkey, Qatar, Colombia, South Africa, and Maldives, they condemned Israel's actions both in Gaza and in Lebanon. Many of the world leaders also denounced the UN Security Council on inaction over the war on Gaza. They believe United Nations should have done more. Israel attacks on Gaza and Lebanon dominated the first day of United Nations General Assembly. There were repeated calls for de-escalation and calling out Israel in many cases. Calls for reforms of the UN Security Council were also made. There were also calls for reforms of the UN General Assembly so that they are able to address more urgently the crisis around the world. Focusing back on the United Security Council, what is this Security Council? Basically, it is responsible for maintaining international peace and security. The UN Security Council is made up of 15 members. First, there were 5 permanent members when it was formed. These 5 permanent members include the United States, Soviet Union, China, United Kingdom, and France. There are 10 other members who are non-permanent, which means they are removed from time to time and replaced with others. The UN Security Council has power to impose sanctions on or authorize the use of force to maintain and restore international peace and security. So it's a powerful body. No wonder they are saying that the UNGA is the world's most important meeting. However, Israel does not agree with that. Israel says that the UNGA, UN General Assembly, is an, I quote, annual charade of hypocrisy, end of quote. So for Israel, they think it's a lot of hypocrisy going on at the UNGA, UN General Assembly. Every member country gets one single vote, every member country of the UN Security Council. All permanent members have power to veto any council decision. They can veto. They can say, no, that will not happen. That is veto powers. There are 5 permanent members. Those are the ones with the veto powers. Israel ambassador to UN said that UNGA, United Nations General Assembly, is an annual charade of hypocrisy. I think because the UN has also been criticizing the actions of Israel, especially in war with Gaza and now Lebanon. South Africa president spoke. His name is Ramaphosa. He called for the UN Security Council reforms. And they said, I quote, more representative body. He calls for a more representative body and more inclusive. Gaza, Lebanon, are the main issues of the day, and I believe they will remain main issues up to the end of this month. People will always continue referring to the war in Gaza, which is being waged by Israel after provocation by Gaza. So, as we speak, over 75 heads of states are attending the UN General Assembly meeting in New York. So our presidents and heads of state are all of them in United Nations General Assembly in New York. But on the sidelines, they are also meeting other presidents. Kenyan President William Ruto is meeting presidents from various parts of the African continent to drum support for the former Prime Minister Raila Amolo Odinga, who is seeking to become the next chairperson of the African Union Commission. So there's a lot of lobbying going on at the UN Security Council. Already they have met the president of Senegal, the new president, and we are likely to see them meeting more other presidents and heads of state from across African continent to drum support for Raila Amolo Odinga. Also, alongside that meeting, they have approved, actually in that meeting, they have adopted the Pact of the Future. The Pact of the Future is a document which discusses the welfare of future generations. Some of the issues in that pact include sustainable development, human rights, climate change, peace and security. They are talking about digital cooperation. In terms of peace and security, the document which was adopted by the UN General Assembly includes agreement to strengthen frameworks that govern outer space to prevent an arms race in outer space. Remember recently, a few years ago, actually a few months ago, the Chinese government was sending rockets into space with warheads, I believe. That it is just going around the world in an orbit around the world. But it's a weapon and it can be deployed anytime when they want. That is what the Pact of the Future is preventing. They are calling for an agreement to strengthen frameworks that govern outer space to prevent arms race in outer space. We don't want to see nuclear weapons being launched into outer space. That way they can be launched to ascend on any country at any time when there is war. That one is a no-go zone. There should be no nuclear weapons in outer space. It should be a safe place. Maybe satellites which are transmitting internet to the world, like what Starlink is doing, that's what we want to see. Positive development, not destructive development like what they wanted to do, to send nuclear weapons into outer space. They have also discussed in that document the need for digital cooperation so that we connect all people, schools, and hospitals to the internet. And on this section, Starlink of Elon Musk is at the forefront. They have thousands of satellites going around the world in the lower orbit around the world, transmitting internet to people's homes, to ships, to digital nomads who are wandering around the world, transmitting internet to airplanes. Now you can access speed internet. In the future, they will install Starlink internet so that when you are in your plane, you are enjoying you are continuing with your work, you are drafting documents, you are sending emails. In fact, even those people who went to outer space, those astronauts, those civilians, they send emails from outer space to their families back here on Earth. That is a new development. It has never happened before. Every time we travel in planes, we are asked to switch off our phones or put them in flight mode so that they don't interfere with the operations of the airplane. Now that is going to change. We are going to have high-speed internet in planes while we are traveling, and this will be for free. It is already for free in some airlines. There has also been a call in that document, the Pact of the Future, a call to protect human rights defenders. We have various human rights defenders around the world who have been killed, maimed, even raped because they are defending our rights. Our right to life, our right to basic education, our rights to healthcare, our rights to housing. All those rights, there are people who are defending them. They are called human rights defenders. So the Pact of the Future is calling for protection of those human rights defenders. William Ruto also spoke at the UN General Assembly. He was calling for reforms of the UN General Assembly. He also called for urgency of addressing climate change, inequality, and debt burden, especially in developing nations. So this is just the beginning of us looking into what the world leaders are discussing at the world's most important meeting in New York, which Israel begs to differ, and Israel calls it annual charade of hypocrisy. But for us, we see it as an important meeting where things are being discussed. The only thing we call upon world leaders who are gathering in New York for the UN General Assembly, is that let us take these goals serious. Let us implement the Pact of the Future to the letter. Let us not discuss and just forget about it and wait for the following year to go and make a moving speech, impressive speech at the world stage. Let us implement things which will make the world a better place. It's not about delivering beautiful speeches in New York. We want to see action on the ground. Already we have failed as world leaders around the world. We have failed to implement the SDGs, the 17 goals of SDGs, including freedom from hunger. Our people around the world are still suffering from hunger. They cannot access adequate nutritious food for their well-being. People are not accessing education. Access to education, I think, goal 3. Access to healthcare. They aren't already enjoying universal healthcare coverage. In Kenya, they started under the administration of Uhuru Kenyatta. They said that one of their main goals was to implement a universal healthcare coverage. But what we are doing is jokes. We aren't committed at all as leaders of the world. Please get more committed. Do not slumber on your work. If you want to provide universal healthcare coverage, you should not allow anybody to engage in corrupt practices around universal healthcare coverage or access to education. We cannot kill programs such as NHIF, which has now changed names and strategies. When we are talking about funding education, let us fund research and development. Let us fund our professors in our local universities to have ample time to conduct research, publish their findings, and more importantly, those in power to implement those research findings so that we can be able to lead to a better world. Those are just but a few things that we are pointing out from the UN General Assembly gathering in New York. We shall keep checking what is going on for today. We will update you at the end of the day the key takeaways from the UN General Assembly meeting in New York. Otherwise, thank you very much for tuning in to Kerosi TV. If you are new here, feel most welcome. If you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe and hit the bell-shaped button so that every time we post new content, you are among the first people to get notifications. Thank you very much. See you in the next episode. Peace.